What if I told you that there is a library so secret that not even cardinals have full access to it, and that inside there are dark truths that could change everything you believe? For centuries, the Vatican Secret Library. It has been one of the most restricted and enigmatic places in the world. Hidden beneath the corridors of Vatican City, protected by armed guards and codes of absolute silence, it guards hidden documents, forbidden sacred texts, books banned by the Church, and prophecies never revealed to the public. But why so much mystery? Why does the Catholic Church itself insist on keeping this information out of the reach of humanity? Some believe that this library contains the darkest secrets in the history of the Church, including accounts of the true life of Jesus, apocryphal Gospels, and even manuscripts that contradict the fundamental dogmas of Christianity. Others talk about hidden prophecies, secret rituals, and even records of contact with supernatural entities, which have been carefully locked away so they never come to light. What exactly is being hidden behind these iron doors? Why do documents considered irrelevant or heretical remain under heavy surveillance in an underground room far from the eyes of the world? Could it be out of fear of what these texts might reveal? Or maybe because the truth is more dangerous than any lie we've been told to date? Leaked images show dark corridors, shelves with books that appear to be centuries old, some wrapped in chains. Former employees, anonymously, report that they saw records that should never have existed, like celestial maps that point to end-of-the-world dates, and letters between popes discussing inexplicable phenomena. And while the world continues in silence, believing it knows the truth, the forbidden history of Christianity, it remains hidden, far from your faith, far from your understanding, but perhaps not for long. Because today, we are going to open a door that the Vatican has tried to keep locked for centuries. And before revealing what was discovered, I want to invite you to write your prayer request here in the comments. Yes, that's right. In the midst of so many mysteries, so many hidden truths and revelations that can shake the faith of many, maintaining the spiritual connection is essential. It doesn't matter your religion or belief. This is a space where we seek, together, the truth, and also spiritual welcome. Write down your prayer, your cry, your doubt, or even that desire you keep in your heart. Let's pray together for revelation, for discernment, and for divine protection in the face of everything that is coming to light. Because when we touch on these secrets hidden by the Vatican, we are talking about something much bigger than old books. We are touching on forces, stories, and intentions that have shaped the faith of billions of people around the world. And if you feel this kind of content is necessary, if you believe these truths cannot remain hidden, then leave your like right now. This shows YouTube that this issue needs to be spread. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell of notifications, because what we are building here is more than a simple series of videos. It is a journey in search of what was lost, what was deleted, what was hidden from us. Here, each episode is a piece of the puzzle. Every comment, every prayer, every click brings us closer to the truth. And now that you're with me, with an open heart and a prepared mind, it's time to move forward. Because the next few minutes will reveal one of the most prohibited already found in the secret archives of the Church. And the contents it carries may be why it was buried beneath layers of silence and fear. Are you ready? So take a deep breath, and let's go deeper into this secret. In recent years, leaks of information and reports from former members of the Church reveal that there is something hidden beneath the halls of the Vatican, and the world needs to know. These reports came not from curious onlookers or conspiracy theorists, but from people who have been inside, who have stepped into the silent halls of the secret library, who have seen with their own eyes the archives that should never exist. These are stories told with fear, with low voices, as if the walls were still listening. But they are real stories, and now you will listen to them. The Vatican Apostolic Library, which many call the Secret Library of the Vatican, has more than 85 kilometers of shelves. What does this mean in practice? It means that there are thousands of documents, sacred texts, medieval manuscripts, personal letters from popes, and books that have been removed from the Bible over the centuries, hidden there, far from the public eye, far from the understanding of the faithful. We are not talking about simple historical archives. We are talking about records that have the power to rewrite the history of the Church, of faith, and of humanity itself. Among the documents cited by these former members, there are reports of texts that openly speak of supernatural experiences within the walls of the Church, exorcisms that were never revealed, prophecies that were under lock and key, spiritual instructions considered too dangerous to circulate among the faithful. There are descriptions of unknown rituals conducted in underground chambers, far from the light of the world. Some documents mention the existence of ancient books that describe the coming of celestial beings. And we're not just talking about angels. One of these texts, cited by a former Vatican librarian, describes a supposed visit by creatures of light who came from the heavens to warn the Church about an imminent event. These reports were classified as heresy and banned from public records. But why? What was it about these testimonies that the Church found so dangerous? Why, instead of being studied and understood, were they hidden? The answer lies in fear. The fear of losing control. The fear that people will discover that much of what has been taught over the centuries may not be the only version of the truth. The fear that the Vatican secrets come to the surface and show that faith was shaped, and at times manipulated, by those who hold spiritual power. Have you ever heard of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene? It is one of many texts considered apocryphal, that is, not officially recognized by the Church, that were found in excavations in the desert, along with the Dead Sea Scrolls. This Gospel reveals intimate dialogues between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, placing her as someone of extreme importance in the construction of faith. But why isn't it in the Bible? Why did the Church choose to ignore it? Because he presents a vision that challenges the patriarchal structure of traditional Christianity. Because he shows a woman as the bearer of a divine revelation. And this, for many religious leaders, was unacceptable. The same happens with the Book of Enoch, one of the most mysterious ever written. He talks about the fallen angels, known as the Watchers, who came to earth and taught humans forbidden secrets. This book was considered sacred by Jewish and early Christian communities, but was removed from the Bible around the 4th century. Why? Because it challenges the traditional narrative of creation and presents a spiritual universe much vaster and more complex than that presented in official scriptures. These texts, and many others, are in the Vatican's Secret Library. But don't think that any scholar can go in there and consult these documents. Access is extremely strictly controlled. Only authorized scholars with approved research may view certain materials. And even so, many areas remain restricted, including for them. There are rooms within the library that have been locked for centuries, doors that have never been opened since the documents inside were sealed. Have you ever stopped to think about what might be behind those doors? Some scholars believe that there are records that prove that certain church decisions were made based on political rather than spiritual interests. Others talk about books that contain end-times prophecies, which would have been revealed to saints and popes throughout history, but which never reached the public. And there are still those who believe that, among the dark corridors of the library, there are even references to extraterrestrial civilizations mentioned in ancient writings, as if the Vatican had always known more than it revealed. Now think with me, why keep these documents? Why hide them if the truth does not fear the light? Does protecting faith justify silencing information? Or does true faith need to be built on the fullness of truth, even if that truth is uncomfortable? We are entering territory that many avoid. We are questioning established narratives, delving into forgotten archives, listening to voices that have been silenced for centuries. And all of this is only possible because there is a thirst for truth. A thirst that grows every day, a thirst that is in you right now as you watch this video, seeking answers to questions you may never have had the courage to ask out loud. That's why I want you to get involved. This video is not a monologue. It's a conversation. It's a movement. It's a calling. And if you've made it this far, I need you to help me continue. Comment below. I want to know the truth, or write, the Vatican needs to open its doors. These phrases are not just words. They are declarations of quest, of courage, of awakening. You can also write down what you think is being hidden inside the Vatican's secret library. A name, a book, a theory. Your opinion matters much more than you realize. It can inspire other people to reflect, to research, to question. And that's exactly what bothers those who want to keep everything silent. The place that holds these mysteries is real, concrete, and scarier than many imagine. Located within Vatican City, the Vatican Apostolic Library, which became popularly known as the Vatican Secret Library, was officially founded in 1475, but its origins date back to the beginnings of the Church. Since the first centuries of Christianity, the Vatican has collected, catalogued, and hidden documents, books, and manuscripts considered to be of high historical and spiritual value, and in many cases, extremely sensitive. Over the centuries, what was just a collection of sacred texts turned into a true underground labyrinth of secrets. Today, it houses approximately 85 kilometers of shelves. Yes, you heard that right. 85 kilometers of archives, hidden beneath the sacred corridors of the Holy See. This amounts to more than 50,000 manuscripts, 1.6 million printed books, 8,300 incunabula, books printed before 1501, thousands of coins and medals, cartographic documents and historical records. But don't be fooled into thinking that all of this is accessible. The vast majority of these items remain locked away, invisible to the public, inaccessible even to high-ranking members of the Church. Access to Vatican's Secret Library. It is one of the most restricted in the world. To enter its main areas, visitors need special authorization granted directly by the library administration through an extremely rigorous process. It is not possible to simply arrive and request a visit. Only academics and researchers with recognized credentials, a very well-defined research purpose, and prior approval can obtain permission to consult part of the collection, and even then, only under very specific conditions. The simple act of touching one of the manuscripts requires special gloves, double authorization, and constant supervision. But what is most surprising is that there are entire sections of the library that remain closed even to these authorized researchers. Sealed rooms, nameless runners, documents that are not even listed in the official catalogues. A network of secrecy so intricate that only a select few within the Vatican know the full extent of what is kept inside. And the burning question is, why? Why keep such a vast and valuable collection away from the eyes of the world? Why restrict access to historical documents that could enrich our understanding of humanity, faith, and the history of Christianity? The answer, although shrouded in silence, points to something much greater than simple religious bureaucracy. We are talking about knowledge that, if revealed, could shake the foundations of traditional faith. Information that retells the history of the Church in a way that few would be prepared to accept. Among the documents that many believe to be locked in the library's most protected rooms are the texts considered heretical by the Church, but which circulated among the first Christians with great respect and devotion. These are Gospels that present different views on the life of Jesus, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the aforementioned Gospel of Mary Magdalene. There are also rumors that certain texts written by apostles considered minor were hidden because they contradicted the doctrines imposed by church councils between the 3rd and 5th centuries. There are also reports of letters written by popes that reveal hidden information about supernatural phenomena witnessed within the Vatican itself, including visions, apparitions, and celestial signs, interpreted as prophetic. Records of internal investigations into demonic possessions, cases of bilocation, prophecies predicting world wars, and even descriptions of cosmic events associated with the end times. Many of these records were reportedly classified as highly sensitive and immediately sealed. A recurring theory among independent scholars is that the Vatican keeps these documents locked away not out of fear of the content itself, but out of fear of the people's reaction when they discover that much of what was considered absolute truth may be just a part of the whole, a selective cut of a story that, deep down, is much more vast, complex, and disturbing than the official books let on. And here comes a detail that few know. Part of this confidential collection is not even recorded on paper. Some of the most valuable information from Vatican's Secret Library, they were transcribed into codes stored on encrypted digital media, or kept only in the memory of certain members of the Curia. There are indications that some files were deliberately destroyed to ensure they never fall into the wrong hands. Others were removed from the Vatican and relocated to even safer and more anonymous locations, far from the reach of researchers, journalists, or even members of the Church with different intentions. This network of concealment reveals a deliberate and continuous effort to protect something that is not only valuable from a historical point of view, but also dangerous from a doctrinal point of view. Because when we talk about Vatican secrets, we are not just dealing with ancient manuscripts or rare books. We are talking about truths that call into question the foundations of faith. We are talking about knowledge that can provoke profound spiritual crises, doctrinal divisions, and perhaps the collapse of structures that have supported religious authority for millennia. And even in the face of all this, there are voices that insist on remaining silent. But there are also those who dared to speak out. Some scholars, priests, and even former library employees began to break their silence, driven by something greater than fear, the desire for truth. They reveal fragments, share clues, deliver reports that help us piece together this dark puzzle. One of them stated that what is hidden there is not just information, it is revelation. And if it's true, then it's something that needs to be seen. It needs to be known. Between the icy walls of Vatican Secret Library rest documents that carry a spiritual burden too heavy to be revealed to the world. Some of these texts have been classified over the centuries as heretics, prohibited, or simply too dangerous to circulate freely among the faithful. They are writings that offer alternative versions of stories that we all grew up hearing as absolute truth. And perhaps that's exactly what makes them so disturbing. They are not just different. They are contrary. They directly contradict the pillars of traditional faith that sustain millions of people around the planet. The so-called apocryphal books are a classic example. They are ancient texts that were excluded from official versions of the Bible during the councils that shaped Christianity as we know it today. Books like Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Book of Enoch, and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene present completely different narratives about the life, teachings, and even the final destiny of Jesus Christ. The content of these Gospels not only expands the spiritual understanding of biblical events, but also directly questions the role of the Church as the sole mediator of truth. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, is composed of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which were never mentioned in the canonical Gospels. Unlike narratives focused on miracles and crucifixion, this text emphasizes self-knowledge as the path to salvation. Jesus, here, appears as a teacher who teaches that the kingdom of God is within us, an idea that directly challenges the institutionalized authority of religion. The Gospel of Philip, in turn, suggests a deep and spiritual closeness between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, treating her not just as a follower, but as a spiritual companion, someone who understood the teachings on a level that the disciples themselves did not. Already, the Book of Enoch, one of the oldest and most intriguing apocryphal texts, presents a completely different narrative about the fall of the angels and the origin of evil in the world. Talk about callings vigilantes, angels who descended to earth, took human women as wives and taught men forbidden knowledge, such as astronomy, alchemy, magic, and war. These angels, corrupted by their relationship with humans, would have been punished and imprisoned. This text was widely accepted among Jews and early Christians, even cited by New Testament authors such as Judas Thaddeus. But over time it was removed from the Bible, disappeared from the West, and only survived in part thanks to Ethiopian tradition. And what about the censored Gospels? Texts that were found in the 19th and 20th centuries in caves, ruins, and archaeological excavations, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library, and that bring an absolutely different vision from what is in the official scriptures. In many of these texts, Jesus is presented as a being of light, a hidden master who came to impart secret wisdom to those who were prepared. There are lines attributed to him that state that truth cannot be imposed, but must be revealed from the inside out, in the heart of each person. A vision that eliminates the need for intermediaries between the human being and the divine, and which, for this very reason, was banned. These Gospels also question the structure of hell, punishment, and salvation, conditioned on institutional obedience. They speak of reincarnation, of higher spiritual dimensions, of direct access to divine knowledge through meditation and inner awakening, ideas that, if propagated, would call into question centuries of dogma, practices, hierarchies, and control. Imagine the impact of this on believers who were taught from childhood to believe in a single narrative, under penalty of eternal damnation. In addition to the apocryphal Gospels and heresy documents, there are also the prophetic texts, perhaps the most feared among those kept in the library. They are hidden prophecies attributed to saints, mystics, and visionaries who passed through the halls of the Vatican over the centuries. Prophecies that talk about great transformations in the Church, about the emergence of a new faith, about the fall of an ancient structure that has hidden truths for too long. One of these documents, supposedly attributed to St. Malachi, describes in detail the arrival of the last pope, the end of the apostolic succession, and the collapse of Rome. Other texts speak of a church within the church, made up of initiates, who have access to hidden knowledge, passed down from generation to generation. These writings describe signs in the heavens, cosmic events, climate changes, mysterious illnesses, all part of a global spiritual transition, a quiet revolution that would begin when the forbidden texts were brought to light. And now think with me, if these documents really exist, and many believe they do, why were they never released? What is the Vatican afraid people will discover? Because these scriptures that contradict the traditional Bible, not only do they offer another perspective, they expose a conflict, a clash between free knowledge and controlling authority, between the truth revealed individually and the truth imposed by institutions. And this isn't just a theological issue, it's a power issue, because whoever holds the truth holds consciences, and whoever controls consciences controls the world. If you've made it this far, it's because you feel like something is out of place, because you know that it is not enough to accept everything you have been taught without questioning, because he understands that faith is not blind submission, but search. And that's why you're in this video, because you are searching, because you're waking up. And that's why I want you to actively participate in this investigation. Comment the sentence below, "I want the forbidden Gospels," if you believe that everyone has the right to know these texts. Or write, "The truth cannot be hidden," if you feel that it is past time for this information to come to light. Your every comment is a sign that there are still people searching for the truth, and together, we'll keep going deeper. Because the closer we get to the heart of these hidden secrets, the more we realize that the truth wasn't just hidden, it was protected tooth and nail, and not just by files, padlocks, or locked doors, but with silence, with fear, and in some cases, with the disappearance of those who dared to speak too much. There are stories that, even within the walls of the Vatican, are told in hushed tones. These are reports of researchers who have been silenced, removed from their projects, publicly discredited, or simply disappeared without a trace after coming close to certain documents considered too dangerous. Some of these cases are documented in independent archives, and others only survive through the strength of the memory of those who lived with those who passed away. One of them is that of the French historian Jean-Louis de la Tour, author of several studies on the apocryphal texts and the secrets of the Vatican. He obtained authorization to study specific documents from the Secret Library, and for years he published articles that raised deep questions about the role of the Church in hiding certain Gospels. But it was precisely when he was preparing to release his boldest book, a volume that promised to reveal details about hidden prophecies and doctrinal manipulations, that he disappeared. According to close friends, Jean-Louis boarded a flight to Rome, where he was scheduled to meet with a senior member of the Curia. After that, he was never seen again. His files were confiscated, his apartment was sealed, and his book manuscript mysteriously disappeared. The official explanation was evasive: spiritual withdrawal, followed by complete silence. But for many, the message was clear: he came too close, and he wasn't the only one. The case of Argentine priest Matteo Ricci is also known in alternative religious studies circles. Ricci was a theologian and researcher with partial access to Vatican documents. In interviews recorded by independent documentary filmmakers, he spoke about the existence of a hidden gospel that described apocalyptic visions, received by an unknown saint from the 13th century. This gospel, according to Ricci, predicted a schism within the church itself and revealed that the institution would undergo a purification through pain in the end times. After these statements, he was suspended from his duties and transferred to a remote monastery. He never spoke publicly again. There is also the intriguing case of American professor Thomas Hillard, a linguist and specialist in ancient texts. He was invited to collaborate on a project to digitize ancient manuscripts from Vatican Secret Library. But when starting to work with certain documents, especially those that dealt with hidden prophecies and visions of saints about the future of humanity, began to receive veiled threats. In an interview given to the newspaper The World, Hillard mentioned that he had read passages that would change the world if published. A few months later, he abandoned his research and disappeared from academic life. No new articles, no new lectures. It simply disappeared from the radar. Coincidence? Forced silencing? Or a carefully structured system to protect what should never be exposed? And perhaps the most frightening thing is to realize that this pattern of concealment is not limited to the last few years. Since the Middle Ages, there have been records of scholars, copyist monks, theologians, and even cardinals who disappeared after dealing with classified documents. Many of these writings described encounters with mysterious entities, celestial revelations not compatible with official doctrine, or spiritual teachings too advanced to control the masses. These men were erased from history, their names removed from lists, their works destroyed, their memories distorted by the church over time. But what exactly did these documents contain? Why were so many lives cut short? Because of scraps of paper and old ink. Because we are not talking about simple theories or disconnected stories. We are talking about documents that contradict the traditional Bible, of censored gospels, of hidden prophecies which talk about the end of the current era and the birth of a new consciousness. We are talking about words that, read by millions, could change not just how we view religion, but how we view reality itself. A former member of the Swiss Guard, who worked for years inside the Vatican, stated in an anonymous interview that there are rooms with access levels beyond traditional security, with guards posted 24 hours a day and reinforced monitoring. In these rooms, the most delicate texts would be kept, secret records of councils, letters between popes and emperors, and documents that make direct reference to catastrophic future events. He also mentions the existence of a spiritual red code, an internal guideline that indicates the level of doctrinal threat of certain writings. Documents with maximum classification cannot be copied, not even photographed, and are read only by a spiritual elite within the church, known by few. These reports, combined with the disappearance or silencing of people involved, make us reflect. How far does the power of those who control knowledge go? What else is hidden beneath the cold corridors of Vatican Secret Library? And if today, in the 21st century, there are still voices being erased because they come close to the truth, what does this tell us about the real content of these files? Because the closer we get to the heart of these mysteries, the more we realize that there is a well-established pattern. The Vatican does not respond, does not deny, and rarely confirms. The official position of the Church in the face of all these reports, these documents, these apocryphal texts, its absolute silence. At most, a vague note, written with carefully chosen words, usually says that certain contents do not have doctrinal validity, or that there is not sufficient evidence regarding their authenticity. And with that, everything ends. No debate, no opening, just silence. But it is precisely this silence that screams. Because in a world where everything is becoming more transparent, where information flows faster than ever, where theories intersect with archaeological discoveries, and where even government archives are becoming public, why does Roman Catholic Church, with all your power and influence, insists on keeping the doors of your most important library closed? Why are there no clear pronouncements on the censored Gospels? Why does no official representative comment on the cases of classified documents, the records of prophetic visions, the files that talk about internal heresies, fallen angels, or texts that describe a timeline? completely different from the one we learned about in catechesis. Many argue that the Vatican does this for a single reason: to protect the faith of the faithful. They say that exposure to certain content can confuse, disorient, or even destroy the spirituality of millions of people. It's the soul protection argument, that some secrets are too big to reveal, that not all knowledge should be shared with everyone, that the Church, as the spiritual mother of humanity, needs to guard certain truths for the greater good. But here begins a deep conflict, because where does the protection of faith end? And where does the protection of faith begin? Censorship of knowledge. Who defines what you can and cannot know? Who decided that you, a thinking being, with the capacity for discernment, with your own spiritual journey, are not prepared to know certain facts? And what happens when that greater good is no longer your good, but rather your interest of an ancient power structure that feeds on the ignorance of the masses? This debate goes far beyond religion. He touches on freedom, in the right to the truth, each person's right to access all information, including information that challenges, bothers, and confronts their faith. And it's not difficult to see that, over the centuries, whenever humanity has been on the verge of discovering something that could change the way we relate to the divine, there was silence, burning of documents, persecution of scholars, and manipulation of narratives. It is no coincidence that, to this day, the Vatican Secret Library remains a fortress of secrecy. And when asked, the answer is always the same. It is a private archive. This is the official explanation. A private archive, as if only internal minutes, administrative reports, or harmless records of past papacies were kept there. But everyone knows that's not what's at stake. Because if it was just that, why the fear? Why is access so restricted? Why so much surveillance? So much bureaucracy? So many rituals so that a researcher can even touch a manuscript? What is at stake is control of the narrative. For centuries, the Catholic Church shaped the history of Christianity, deciding what is heresy and what is doctrine, what is divine revelation, and what is mystical delusion. Entire books were banned, versions of Gospels were rewritten, and entire theologies were constructed based on decisions made by councils that, in many cases, served politics more than spirituality. And now that we have access to previously unobtainable information, that archaeologists have discovered manuscripts that the Church tried to bury in time, that scholars have begun to piece together the forbidden puzzle, the only thing we receive as an official response is silence. And this silence speaks. He tells us that there is still much to be revealed. He shows us that the fear of the truth is even greater than the courage to face its consequences. And more than that, it challenges us. Because, by denying answers, the Vatican is saying, albeit covertly, that there's something there that can't be revealed. And that, in itself, says a lot. But even in the face of this silence, voices emerge that do not remain silent. Former priests who decided to break their oath of silence. Independent researchers who risk their reputations to show the world what they discovered. Journalists who infiltrate forbidden archives. Former guards who give anonymous interviews. Scholars who decipher forgotten texts. They are the ones who bravely challenge silence. And they all point in the same direction. There are documents. There are manuscripts. There are gospels. There are letters. There are prophecies, which contradict the story told for centuries. Among these documents, according to some sources, would be records of apocalyptic visions delivered to popes and archived as material not advisable for the public. Messages that speak of extreme weather events, pandemics, global wars, the fall of religious systems, and the emergence of a new spiritual consciousness. Texts that describe the rise of a false messiah and the replacement of sacred symbols with new globalized doctrines. And still, nothing is said. No explanation, no official statement, just the repetition that certain texts have no doctrinal relevance. And the question that remains, and that needs to be heard louder, is, who decides what is doctrinal? Who controls what you can and cannot believe? And why were those who sought deeper answers silenced, discredited, or driven into spiritual exile? If you also feel that this silence needs to be broken, comment below on the sentence, "The truth cannot be archived." Or if you prefer, write, The Vatican's silence speaks too loudly. These phrases help spread that message. What's more, they show that you are awake, that you are searching, that you will not accept empty answers as if they were divine revelations. Among the cold corridors of Vatican Secret Library, far beyond the books we know, lies a set of documents that, according to reports from former officials and dissident theologians, have content so disturbing, so revealing, that their access is restricted even to some members of the Roman Curia itself. These texts are not just different from traditional teachings, they are explosive. These are records that openly speak of hidden revelations about the life of Jesus, of aspects of spirituality that were ripped from the scriptures, of events that completely contradict the institutional narrative of the Christian faith. One of the most talked about documents, although never officially recognized, is known among researchers as the Hidden Gospel of Nazareth. This text, which was supposedly written by a close follower of Jesus, presents passages that do not appear in any of the four canonical Gospels. Among these passages, there is one in which Jesus openly mentions that the truth is not in words, but in the awakened heart. And more, there is a passage that says that the kingdom of God will not be built by temples, but by consciences that free themselves from lies. Words like this, if disseminated widely, could lead millions of believers to question the authority of religious institutions. And when talking about Mary Magdalene, hidden documents go even further. Several manuscripts found in Nag Hammadi and other archaeological sites, and copies of which are kept confidential in the Vatican, describe Mary not only as a disciple but as Jesus' closest spiritual companion. There are mentions of private dialogues between the two, where she is called the one who understands the invisible, and there are passages in which the other apostles demonstrate jealousy of her relationship with the Master. One of these texts, known as the Dialogue of the Savior, suggests that it was to Mary Magdalene that Jesus transmitted deeper teachings related to spiritual dimensions, the cycle of souls, and the true purpose of incarnation. These documents still describe a Jesus who is not bound by literal interpretations of the Bible, but who speaks in layers of reality, in overlapping worlds, and in celestial beings who guide the evolution of the human soul. And it is at this point that the most controversial passages emerge, those that speak openly about the fallen angels, known in tradition as the Vigilantes, mentioned not Book of Enoch. This book, widely venerated by Jews and early Christians, but taken from the official Bible, describes the Watchers as angels sent to earth to help humanity, but who ended up falling in love with human women and transmitting forbidden knowledge, such as astrology, metallurgy, magic, and even spiritual warfare. These angels would have generated a hybrid race, the Nephilim, which corrupted divine creation, provoking God's wrath and triggering the universal flood. The most disturbing thing about these texts, kept away from the eyes of the Tao world, is that they suggest that the influence of these beings has not yet ended. There are records that speak of preserved lineages, of angelic blood that still flows among the mighty of the earth, and a possible reactivation of old pacts in the end times. And that brings us to the darkest part of all, hidden prophecies of the end times. Inside the Vatican archives, according to confidential sources, are copies of letters, visions, and messages received by saints, nuns, and priests over the centuries. Visions that were never included in official church documents, but which describe in detail a chaotic future marked by spiritual wars, institutional collapses, climate crises, global pandemics, and the emergence of a single, unified religion, led by a Messiah impostor. One of these documents, supposedly written by an Italian nun in the 18th century, describes that, in the time of the end, a man will appear with the appearance of Christ. He will speak like Christ. He will be received as Christ, but he will deny the essence of Christ. This false Messiah, according to the text, will bring with him a rewritten gospel with words sweet as honey, but which will hide spiritual poison. Another excerpt says that the church towers will fall one by one, not by the hands of the enemy, but by the abandonment of the pastors themselves. There are also prophecies directly linked to the creation of the world, documents that suggest that the story of human origin was manipulated, that the Genesis narrative is a codified parable, and that there was external interference, not divine, but from intermediate spiritual entities in the formation of human consciousness. These revelations, if proven, would not only destroy the accepted chronology of the Christian universe, but would open up space for a completely new understanding of spirituality and the connection between man and the cosmos. And that is precisely why the silence persists. Because this information isn't just uncomfortable, it's explosive. Because they reveal a Jesus much more spiritual than institutional, a Mary Magdalene with authority, angels who made mistakes and influenced the earth, and an end of times that will not come with visible trumpets, but with the silent manipulation of human consciences, led by a doctrine disguised as light. But the burning question is, why does all this remain hidden? Why does the Vatican, which has had access to this information for centuries, continue to remain silent? Why were so many documents buried, sealed, censored? Why don't the people, those who live the faith, have the right to know? Because when we talk about all these hidden documents, censored manuscripts, buried prophecies and revelations about Jesus, Mary Magdalene, the fallen angels, and the true meaning of creation, we are not just talking about history, theology, or sacred archaeology. We are talking about something much deeper. Can and power, especially when threatened, acts with all its strength to preserve itself. And therein lies the most obvious but least said reason for all this silence surrounding the Vatican's secret archives. It's not just to protect faith, it's to protect the structure. Behind the relics, the golden walls, and the sacred rituals lies one of the oldest, richest, and most influential institutions in human history. The Vatican is not just a spiritual headquarters, it is also a political, diplomatic, and cultural power. Controlling knowledge over the centuries has been one of the most effective ways of controlling people. And controlling the sacred narrative was, and continues to be, a way of maintaining unchallenged authority over millions of believers around the world. If these truths came to light, what would be left of religious authority? Imagine the impact. People who have always believed in the immaculate tradition of the Church are suddenly faced with documents that show a totally different version of the life of Jesus, not as an unreachable and dogmatic being, but as a spiritual master who taught the inner path, who valued the divine feminine through Mary Magdalene, who spoke of higher spiritual dimensions, and who directly challenged the centralization of faith in institutions. Now think about what that would do. A break in traditional faith, an irreversible crack in the image built over millennia. And we are not just talking about the faith of one group or another. We are talking about the faith that sustains entire countries, that influences political decisions, that moves billions in cultural, financial, and ideological heritage, revealing that the story of creation has been manipulated, that fallen angels have descendants, that certain prophecies about the end times have been intentionally erased, would be the equivalent of pulling at the thread of a fabric too old to resist. The entire plot would begin to unravel. The religious structure, not just Catholic but Christian as a whole, would be facing an unprecedented moral, doctrinal, and spiritual collapse. This is the real fear. The fear of collapse. The fear that people will start to question everything, from the most basic dogmas to the most ingrained rituals. Because when the truth seeps through the cracks of silence, it spreads like light in a dark room. And once the light comes in, it's impossible to pretend that darkness still dominates. But what is at stake here is not just the survival of an institution, it's the survival of the entire system of spiritual control which has been established for centuries and which, in order to maintain itself, depends on the masses continuing to believe that the version told is the only one possible. Therefore, the reaction is not just to hide, it's discrediting. It is labeling any dissenting voice as heretic, crazy, rebel, or enemy of the faith. Throughout history, how many have been burned, persecuted, silenced in the name of preserving an official truth? Documents that could transform the understanding of spirituality were buried not because they were false, but because they were dangerous for the maintenance of power. Writings that spoke of an interconnected world, of a God who dwells within each human being, of a Christ who did not ask for temples or hierarchies, but rather for inner transformation. These were removed from circulation. because its simple existence threatens to tear down the pillars of a spiritual empire that has governed minds and hearts for centuries. And the most intriguing thing is that many within the Church itself know this. There are priests, theologians, and scholars who have already had access to some of this content and who, in private conversations, admit that the fear of losing control is greater than the desire to reveal the truth. That the Vatican has become a guardian of stability, and that stability to be maintained requires secrets. One of these priests, who requested anonymity, once said that opening the archives would be like dropping a theological bomb on the heart of Christianity. And maybe he's right, but is hiding the truth the way to go? Do the people who support this entire structure with their faith not have the right to know everything? The most ironic thing is that many of these documents do not deny the existence of God, nor do they attack true spirituality. On the contrary, they deepen, expand, free. They show an even more powerful Christ, not because he dominates, but because he illuminates. A Christ who did not ask to be worshipped in images, but lived in essence. A Christ who was perhaps erased so that an institutional version could be kept on the throne. The truth is that by hiding these texts, the Church is not protecting the faith. She protects herself. Protect your secrets, your prestige, your political connections, your invisible alliances. Protect what was built in the name of salvation, but which has so often used ignorance as a tool of submission. Because where there is doubt, there is questioning. And where there is questioning, there is awakening. And where there is awakening, there is loss of control. That's why the fear is so great. Not the content itself, but what it causes. The spiritual liberation of the masses. The reconstruction of a living, conscious, and true faith, which does not depend on hierarchies, nor on dogmas imposed by those who think they own divine truth. And this liberation begins when we ask ourselves, what else has been hidden? What else was silenced? What else has been erased in the name of stability? If you feel that these questions need to be asked, and that the search for truth should not be silenced for fear of collapse, write in the comments, "The structure will fall," or "Truth is greater than power." These phrases show that you are not here out of empty curiosity, but out of an authentic thirst for revelation. And when you learn what was found in a letter hidden for more than 400 years inside a golden reliquary in the Hue, Vatican Underground, you will never see faith the same way again. And it is at this point that we need to stop and reflect, because the question that echoes now, in the tense silence between everything that has already been revealed and what is yet to come, cannot be ignored. If these documents are revealed, will your faith endure? Is the structure of your belief, shaped since childhood, built on repeated dogmas and teachings accepted without question, ready to face a truth that perhaps does not fit with what you have always believed? This is the real dilemma, not just for you, but for millions. Because faith, when built on imposed foundations, runs the risk of crumbling at the slightest sign of contradiction. But true faith, that which comes from within, that does not depend on institutions, that resists time and silence, can go through any revelation. And that is precisely why these documents remain locked. Because fear is not of the truth itself, it's the impact it would make. And what else is hidden? What could be about to come to light? According to reports from people who passed through the hidden corridors of the Vatican Secret Library, there are documents that have not even been classified yet. Texts found in excavations on the outskirts of Rome. Manuscripts in ancient languages that mention events that are not even part of the current liturgical calendar. There are reports of Egyptian records containing mention of a luminous master who walked among men in the 1st century, and who was followed by 12 guardians. Others speak of prophecies inherited from the Essenes, which describe in detail not only the end of an era, but the emergence of a new type of human being, conscious, awakened, impossible to manipulate. And there are even more recent documents, dating from less than 100 years ago, that describe secret meetings between popes and star scholars, exchanges of information with government representatives, and descriptions of celestial phenomena that were witnessed and recorded, but never made public. What's in these files? Why do these letters, reports, maps, and records remain sealed, even with the advancement of science, technology, and collective consciousness? The answer although shrouded in mystery, always seems to revolve around the same point: control. If you control the narrative of creation, you control the meaning of existence. If you control the concept of salvation, you control the fear of damnation. And if you control fear, you control behavior. But what if now all of this hangs in the balance? If these texts, these letters, these revelations finally come to light, what will become of the structure that has always been supported by silence? And most importantly, what will become of your faith? Will she collapse with the revelation? Or will it rebuild itself on new, truer, deeper, freer bases, and which may hold the key to all that is to come? But before we go any further, we need to pause and reflect on something that has been ignored for centuries, but which has now become impossible to avoid. Do you believe the Church has the right to hide these secrets? Yes, this question is direct, uncomfortable, and necessary, because at the center of this story are not just ancient documents, apocryphal gospels, or theories forgotten by time. There is the right to the truth. The right of every believer, every seeker, every human being has to know what was deliberately removed from official history. We are not talking about protecting the faith, as many claim. We are talking about control faith. And there is a very big difference between these two things. A Catholic Church, over the centuries, assumed the role of guardian of sacred knowledge. But at what point did this role stop being a spiritual duty and become an institutional strategy of power? When did preserving the purity of doctrine become censor books, hide revelations, and silence voices who thought differently? This underground library in the heart of the Vatican, with its miles of shelves and inaccessible documents, is not just an archive. It is the symbol of a structure that believes it owns the truth, and that has decided on its own that you are not ready for it. But are you not ready? Or are they afraid that you are? Among the many texts hidden in the Vatican archives, there is one that causes shudders even among the most skeptical scholars. A manuscript considered so dangerous, so revolutionary, that it was locked in an iron box inside an armored room and catalogued as not authorized for reading even by superior clerics. The contents of this manuscript, according to anonymous reports from former employees and independent historians, could forever change the way the Christian world views the most important event of faith, the crucifixion of Jesus. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which narrate Jesus' death as a redemptive sacrifice, this text suggests a hypothesis that the Church has never allowed to be even debated. Jesus would have survived the crucifixion. According to this manuscript, he would have been taken from the cross while still alive, treated in secret by faithful followers, and taken to a distant region where he continued to teach, far from the eyes of Rome and the scribes of the new institutionalized faith. An idea like this not only challenges the core of Christian theology, but also calls into question all the symbols that sustain the authority and liturgy of the Church to this day. And perhaps that is exactly why this text remained hidden, because accepting this possibility means admitting that, at some point, the truth was deliberately replaced by a more convenient version. It means recognizing that part of the story was constructed to serve structure, not spirituality, and that for an institution that bases its legitimacy on immutable dogmas would be devastating. But the most important thing here is not just the content of the manuscript. It's the fact that it exists, that it was kept with extreme secrecy, that there was an entire operation to ensure that it was never revealed. And this raises the question that can no longer be silenced. What else has been erased, silenced, hidden within the walls of this sacred empire? If you've stayed with me this far, it's because you're not here by chance. You feel like there is something bigger, something hidden, and that this truth needs to be discovered. So, if this quest is also yours, if you feel you need to continue exploring these secrets together with me, subscribe to the channel now. Activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next episodes, because what's ahead goes even deeper than anything we've seen so far. And comment below right now. I went all the way because I want to know the truth. This phrase shows that you are part of those who think differently, those who are not afraid to face the unknown. And I read every comment, so I really want to know, who are the ones who made it this far? If this video made you reflect, leave a like, because it shows me that you want more content like this. And it helps YouTube deliver this video to other people who are ready to wake up too. And now, does not leave the channel. The next video is already appearing on your screen, where we will reveal the contents of a secret manuscript that could change everything you believe about Jesus. Click now, and let's go deeper into this investigation together. The truth is closer than ever.